The rain hammered down on the cobblestones outside Kensington Palace. Inside the grand hallway, a young royal guard stood frozen, his hand trembling on his rifle. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. His name was James Whitmore. 23 years old? This was only his second week on the royal detail. He'd trained for months, passed every test, earned his place among the elite. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. Through the ornate window, he could see shadows moving where no shadows should be. The security perimeter had been breached. His earpiece crackled with static, then went dead. He was alone. James looked down the corridor toward the private quarters where Princess Catherine and Prince William were hosting a small charity dinner. 30 guests. Minimal security because it was supposed to be a quiet, private event. No media, no crowds, no threats. But someone hadn't gotten that message. His heart pounded against his ribcage. Every instinct screamed at him to sound the alarm, to call for backup, to do something. But his training held him steady. Don't panic. Assess. Act before we continue with what happened next. If you're enjoying this incredible true story of courage and duty, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. Won't want to miss how this unfolds. James made his decision. He moved silently down the corridor, his boots making no sound on the Persian carpet. The palace felt different tonight. The air was thick, heavy. Even the portraits on the walls seemed to watch him with worried eyes. He reached the junction where the main hallway split. Left led to the dining room. Right led to the service entrance. He paused, listening. That's when he heard it. A whisper, metal scraping against stone. Someone was inside. James pressed himself against the wall, controlling his breathing like they taught him. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Stay calm. The princess and prince were 50 meters away, laughing with guests, completely unaware that danger had entered their home. He couldn't rush in, couldn't cause a scene without knowing what he was dealing with. If he was wrong, he'd lose everything. His career, his reputation. But if he was right and did nothing, the whisper came again, closer now. James caught a glimpse of movement reflected in a gilded mirror. A figure dressed in black, moving with purpose toward the royal wing. Not a guest. Not palace staff. An intruder. James's mouth went dry. This was real. This was happening. And he was the only thing standing between that shadow and the future king and queen of England. He thought of his mother, who'd cried with pride when he joined the guard. His father, a retired police officer, who'd told him the uniform meant sacrifice. His little sister, who called him a hero, even though he'd never done anything heroic until now. James stepped out from the wall. His rifle raised, his voice steady, despite the fear coursing through his veins. Stop. Identify yourself. The figure froze. Then slowly, very slowly, began to turn. Asterisk, the intruder's hands rose slowly, empty, no weapon visible. But James knew better than to relax. In the dim light of the corridor, he still couldn't see the person's face. I said, identify yourself. James's voice was firmer now. Trembling had stopped. Training had taken over. Before the figure could respond, footsteps echoed from behind James. Heavy, rapid. His backup had finally arrived. Sergeant Davies, a 20-year veteran, appeared at his side, weapon drawn. What have we got? Davies whispered. Unknown individual. Entered through the east wing. James kept his eyes locked on the shadow. Davies spoke into his radio. Code Amber, secure the principals, now. Within seconds, the palace transformed. Silent alarms triggered. Steel barriers descended over windows. In the dining room, 2 guards appeared at Prince William's side, their faces calm, but their movements urgent. The prince understood immediately, touched Catherine's hand gently, whispered something. And together they stood, excusing themselves from the confused guests. Back in the corridor, the intruder finally spoke. A woman's voice shaking. Please, I need help, my daughter. They took my daughter. James's grip tightened. A distraction tactic, a trap. He'd read about operatives using emotional appeals to lower defenses. Davies moved forward, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The light fell on the woman's face. Tears streaked her cheeks. Her clothes were wet from the rain, torn at the sleeve. Blood stained her collar. "Ma'am, you're trespassing on royal property," Davies said. "How did you get in here?" The woman's knees buckled. She caught herself against the wall, breathing hard. "The garden. I climbed the fence. I didn't know where else to go. They're going to kill her, my Emma. She's only 7. James felt his certainty waver. This didn't feel like an act. The raw panic in her voice, the desperation in her eyes, it was real terror. But Davies remained professional. "We need you to come with us. We'll get you help, but you cannot be here. You don't understand." The woman's voice cracked. "I went to the police. They said there's nothing they can do. No ransom demand. No proof. But I know who took her. I have evidence. I just need someone to listen. Someone with power." James glanced at Davies. The sergeant's jaw was set, his expression unreadable. This was a decision above their pay grade. But they couldn't just escort her out, not if she was telling the truth, not if a child was in danger. From down the hall, Prince William appeared, flanked by protection officers. He shouldn't have been there. He should have been in the secure room. But that wasn't how William worked. James had learned that in his 2 weeks here. The prince never hid, while others handled problems. "What's the situation?" William's voice was calm, authoritative. Davies started to speak, but the woman interrupted, falling to her knees. "Your Highness, please. They took my Emma 3 days ago. I'm begging you." William looked at the woman. His face showed something James didn't expect. Not annoyance, not fear. Compassion. "Get her to the security office," William said quietly. "And get her medical attention. I'll speak with her once she's been cleared." The woman sobbed, relief flooding her face. "Thank you. Thank you." As Davies called for medical staff, William turned to James. Their eyes met. The prince nodded once, a small gesture of acknowledgement. James had done his job. He'd stopped a threat. But he'd also shown restraint. He hadn't overreacted. "Well done, guardsman," William said. Those 3 words settled over James like a weight and a gift all at once. But as medical staff arrived and began treating the woman's injuries, James couldn't shake a feeling. Something about her story, the timing, the desperation, the way she'd known exactly where to climb the fence. What if this wasn't the threat? What if this was just the distraction? **** James couldn't voice his concern to the prince. Not directly. Not with his limited rank. But as the medical team led the woman away, he caught Davies' eye and tilted his head toward the East Wing entrance. Davies understood immediately. Years of experience had taught him to trust his gut, and James's instinct was screaming. "Your Highness," Davies said carefully, "I recommend we complete a full perimeter sweep before resuming the evening." William studied the sergeant for a moment. He wasn't foolish. He knew what that meant. "Do it. We'll keep our guests comfortable meanwhile." As William returned to the dining room with his protection detail, Davies grabbed James's shoulder.
"Owie! Show me where she came in."
They moved quickly through the palace corridors, collecting 2 more guards on the way. The rain outside had intensified into a full storm. Thunder rolled across the London sky. Lightning illuminated the manicured gardens in brief, stark flashes. The East Wing garden fence was 8 feet tall, topped with decorative spikes. Difficult to climb, but not impossible. James found the spot immediately. Fresh scratches on the metal. A torn piece of fabric caught on a spike. Footprints in the mud below, already filling with rainwater. But there was something else. "Sir," James said, crouching down. "Look at this. Another set of prints, larger, deeper, leading away from the fence toward the service building. Someone heavier, someone who'd moved with purpose, not panic." Davies swore under his breath. He radioed the command center. "We have a possible secondary intruder. I need eyes on all service entrances." Now, the response was immediate. Security camera feeds were pulled, motion sensors rechecked. The storm was causing problems. The cameras flickered. The sensors triggered false alarms as wind bent tree branches and sent garden furniture scraping across stone. James's mind raced. If someone had used the woman as a distraction, they'd had a 3-minute window, maybe 4, enough time to get inside, enough time to reach. The gifts, James said suddenly. Davies looked at him sharply. What? The charity dinner? Guests brought donations, items for auction. They're staged in the West Gallery. No one's guarding them because the focus is on the principals. Understanding dawned on Davies's face. Theft. They ran. Through the rain around the palace exterior, entering through the west entrance. The gallery was quiet. Too quiet. Display tables lined the room, covered in donations. Art pieces, jewelry, historical artifacts loaned for the evening's cause. James scanned the room. Everything looked untouched, undisturbed. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe paranoia had gotten the better of him. Then he saw it. The smallest detail, a display case slightly ajar. The kind of thing you'd miss unless you were looking. Inside, a velvet cushion where something had rested. The indent was still visible. It's gone, James whispered. Davies moved to the case, examined the lock. Professional work. No forced entry. Someone who knew what they were doing. What was here? Davies asked. James remembered the auction catalog. He'd reviewed it during his briefing. The Ashworth Ruby, 17th century, on loan from the British Museum. Worth £3 million? The weight of that number hung in the air. This wasn't just a theft. This was an international incident. On royal property, under their watch. Davies's face went pale. We need to lock down the entire glass shattered somewhere in the palace. An alarm shrieked. Then another. And another. James's radio exploded with voices. Guards shouting coordinates. Command center trying to make sense of chaos. And underneath it all, a distant sound that made James's blood run cold. Screaming. Not from the dining room. Not from the guests. This was coming from the North Tower. The private family wing, where Princess Catherine had gone to check on her children after the initial alarm. Davies and James exchanged a look. This wasn't about a ruby. This had never been about a ruby. They'd been played. All of them. The woman. The theft. The alarms. All of it designed to scatter their forces, divide their attention, create confusion. And now, someone was in the North Tower. With the princess. With the children, James didn't wait for orders. He ran. His boots pounded against marble floors. His heart hammered in his chest. Every second mattered. Every moment counted. He took stairs 3 at a time, his rifle ready, his mind clear. Fear had burned away, leaving only purpose. Behind him, he could hear Davies calling for backup, alerting every available guard. But James knew he'd reach the North Tower first. He just hoped he wouldn't be too late. The North Tower corridor was silent when James arrived. No screaming now, no alarms. Just the sound of his own ragged breathing and the storm battering the windows. 3 doors lined the hallway. The first led to a study. The second to a playroom. The third to the children's private quarters. All 3 were closed. No sign of forced entry. No indication of which room the threat had come from. James pressed his back against the wall, trying to slow his breathing to listen. His training screamed at him to wait for backup. Never enter alone. Never engage without support. But what if there wasn't time? A soft sound reached his ears, crying. A child, trying to be quiet. Coming from the 3rd door, James moved forward, his hand steady on his weapon. He reached for the door handle, turned it slowly. The door opened without a sound. Inside, the room was dark, except for a nightlight shaped like a star. Princess Charlotte sat on the floor between 2 beds. Her arms wrapped around Prince George and Prince Louis. All 3 children were wide-eyed, trembling. Charlotte, the oldest at 9 years old, had her finger to her lips, telling her brothers to stay quiet. Relief flooded through James. They were safe. Scared, but safe. Then he saw why they were hiding. The window was open. Rain blew in, soaking the carpet. The curtains whipped in the wind, and on the floor, a muddy footprint, fresh, leading from the window to the door that connected to the princess's private sitting. room someone had been here, and they'd gone through to the next room where Princess Catherine was. James's mind split into two tracks. He couldn't leave the children, but he couldn't abandon the princess. He made a decision that broke protocol, but felt right in his gut. He knelt down to Charlotte's level, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm Guardsman Whitmore. You're going to be okay. I need you to be very brave. Can you do that?" Charlotte nodded, her chin trembling, but her eyes determined. She was her father's daughter. "Lock this door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except your father or Sergeant Davies." "Do you know Sergeant Davies?" "The one with the gray mustache," Charlotte whispered back. "That's right. No one else. Can you do that?" Yes. James wanted to say more, to comfort them, but there was no time. He moved to the connecting door, pressed his ear against it.
Silence.
Then a voice. Male. Angry. "Where is it?" James couldn't hear the princess's response, but he heard the tone. Calm, steady. She was talking to the intruder, keeping him engaged. Buying time. She knew help was coming. James tested the door handle, locked from the other side. He could break it down, but that would alert the intruder, potentially escalate the situation. He needed another way. His eyes went to the open window. The exterior wall of the palace had decorative stonework, ledges, handholds. In better weather, maybe. But in this storm, with rain-slicked stone and wind strong enough to tear him off the wall, it didn't matter. There was no other option. James slung his rifle across his back and climbed out the window. The rain hit him like icy needles. The wind tried to rip him away from the wall. He pressed himself flat against the stone. Inching along the narrow ledge toward the princess's window below him, the ground was 40 feet down. One slip, one wrong move. That's all it would take. Don't look down. Focus forward. Move. His fingers found holds in the stonework. His boots scraped against the ledge. Thunder crashed so close it shook the wall. Lightning turned the world white. In that flash, James could see into the princess's room. Catherine stood near her desk, her back straight, her hands visible. A man in black tactical gear faced her, a weapon in his hand. Not pointed at her yet, but the threat was clear. James kept moving. The window was just ahead. 3 more feet. 2 more. 1 more. He reached the window frame and peered inside. The intruder's back was to him. Catherine's eyes flicked to the window, saw James, but her expression didn't change. She was incredible. Absolutely incredible. She kept talking, her voice measured. "If you leave now, you might make it out. But security knows you're here. They're coming." A man laughed. "Then I guess I'll need insurance." He moved toward her, reaching for her arm. James didn't think. He crashed through the window, glass exploding around him, his body slamming into the intruder. They went down hard, rolling across the floor. The man's weapon clattered away. The fight was brutal and fast. The intruder was trained, skilled. He landed a punch to James's ribs that drove the air from his lungs. James responded with an elbow to the man's jaw. They grappled, knocked over furniture, slammed into walls. Catherine had grabbed the weapon, was holding it. Her hands shaking, but her stance firm. The intruder broke free, scrambled to his feet, and ran for the main door. He threw it open and came face to face with Sergeant Davies and 6 armed guards. Game over. The man raised his hands, surrendering. Davies' team moved in, securing him with practiced efficiency. It was over in seconds. James lay on the floor, breathing hard, bleeding from cuts where the glass had caught him. Catherine knelt beside him, her hand on his shoulder. "Are you all right?" she asked softly. James wanted to laugh. The future Queen of England was asking if he was okay. James managed to nod. The children. They're locked in the next room. They're safe. Catherine's relief was visible. She stood and moved to the connecting door. Knocked gently. "Charlotte, darling, it's Mummy. You can open the door now." The lock clicked. The door opened a crack. Charlotte peeked out, saw her mother, and the dam broke. All 3 children rushed to Catherine, clinging to her. She held them, whispering reassurances, kissing their heads. Prince William arrived seconds later, having fought his way through the chaos. He took in the scene with one sweeping glance. The broken window, the overturned furniture, James on the floor bleeding. The captured intruder being led away. He went to his family first. That was right. That was what mattered. He gathered them close, his face finally showing the fear he'd kept hidden. But his hands were steady as he checked each child, making sure they were unharmed. Then he came to James. He extended his hand, helped him to his feet. "What you did," William said, his voice thick with emotion, "climbing that wall in this storm," didn't finish. He didn't need to. James understood. Medical staff arrived. They insisted on examining James, treating his cuts, checking for broken ribs. He let them work, watching as the princess comforted her children, as the prince spoke quietly with Davies. As normalcy slowly returned to the palace, the full story emerged over the next hour. The woman who'd climbed the fence was real. Her daughter had been taken, but not by kidnappers. By her ex-husband in a custody dispute. The police had been helping, contrary to her claims. She'd been desperate, not thinking clearly. And she'd unknowingly provided the distraction for a planned heist. The intruder was part of an organized group. They'd planned to steal the Ashworth ruby and had expected minimal resistance during the charity event. But when their theft was discovered faster than anticipated, the leader had improvised. He'd gone for a hostage, hoping to use the princess as leverage for escape. He'd underestimated everyone. The guards, the princess, and especially James Whitmore. The charity dinner was quietly ended. Guests were escorted out with apologies and assurances. The media never learned the full truth. The official statement mentioned a security drill and a medical emergency. Nothing more. James sat in the guards' common room at 3 a.m, a blanket around his shoulders, a cup of tea he hadn't touched growing cold in his hands. Other guards had stopped by, patted his back, offered quiet congratulations. But mostly, they'd left him alone. He kept replaying the moment on the ledge. The rain, the wind, the certainty that one wrong move would kill him, the even greater certainty that he had to try anyway. Sergeant Davies sat down across from him. For a long moment, neither man spoke. "You broke protocol," Davies finally said, engaging alone. Climbing the exterior wall, not waiting for backup. James nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. You could have died." "Yes, sir." Davies was quiet again. Then he leaned forward. "You also saved the life of the future Queen of England and protected 3 children from trauma they'll never have to remember because you acted fast enough. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to accept a commendation. You're going to let the prince thank you properly tomorrow. And you're going to understand that what you did tonight is what this uniform means." James looked up, met Davies' eyes. "I was terrified. Good fear keeps you sharp. It's when you stop being afraid that you get careless." Davies stood, placed a hand on James's shoulder. "Get some rest, guardsman. You've earned it." But James couldn't rest. Not yet. There was something he needed to do. He found his way to the North Tower, now heavily guarded but quiet. A senior protection officer stopped him, but then nodded, understanding. James climbed to the children's floor. Princess Charlotte was sitting in the hall outside her room, unable to sleep. And Nanny sat with her, but Charlotte was staring at nothing, processing everything that had happened. She saw James and stood up. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then she did something that broke through every bit of James's composure. She saluted him. A perfect, crisp salute. James's throat tightened. He returned the salute, then knelt down. "You were very brave tonight, Your Highness. You protected your brothers. You stayed calm. You did everything right." "So did you," Charlotte said softly. "I saw you on the ledge. Through the window. You could have fallen, but I didn't. Why did you do it?" James thought about his answer carefully. "Because that's what we do. We protect people who matter. And you matter very much." Charlotte nodded slowly. Then she stepped forward and hugged him. Just once, briefly. When she pulled back, She was crying quietly. "Thank you for keeping my mummy safe." James couldn't speak. He just nodded. As he walked back through the palace that night, passing portraits of kings and queens who'd ruled for centuries, James understood something profound. He'd joined the royal guard for honor, for tradition, for the pride of wearing the uniform, but tonight he'd learned what it really meant. It wasn't about ceremony or spectacle. It was about being willing to climb a rain-slicked wall in a storm because a family needed you. Asterisk, the sun rose over London.
Washing the palace in soft gold light.
The storm had passed. The gardens sparkled with raindrops. Everything looked peaceful, as if the night's terror had been a dream, but it hadn't been a dream. James stood at attention in the palace's private receiving room, his dress uniform immaculate despite the bandages hidden beneath his sleeves. His ribs ached with each breath, but he kept his posture perfect. Prince William and Princess Catherine entered together. In the daylight, James could see the exhaustion on their faces, the toll the night had taken. But there was something else, too. Gratitude. Real, profound gratitude. At ease, Guardsman Whitmore, William said. James relaxed his stance, but kept his dignity. This was still the future king. Catherine spoke first. "I wanted to speak with you privately before the formal proceedings. What you did last night was extraordinary, but I need you to know something. When I saw you on that ledge, in that storm, I was terrified. Not for myself. For you," her words carried weight. "Genuine concern. You're young," she continued. "You have your whole life ahead of you, and you risked it for us. That's not something we take lightly." William nodded. "The easy thing would have been to wait for backup, to follow protocol. No one would have blamed you. But you didn't choose the easy thing. You chose the right thing. And that's why we wanted to thank you personally before this becomes official." He extended his hand. James shook it, feeling the strength in the prince's grip. "The children are all right?" James asked quietly. Catherine smiled. "George slept through most of the chaos once we reassured him. Louis thinks you're a superhero. And Charlotte," she paused, her smile growing. "Charlotte told her father that when she grows up, she wants guards like you protecting her family." Something in James's chest swelled with pride so fierce it almost hurt. "There will be a formal recognition," William said. "A commendation for valor. It will be public. The media will want to tell your story. You'll become known. Is that something you're comfortable with?" James considered. Fame had never been his goal. He'd joined the guard to serve, not to be celebrated. But he understood the bigger picture. His actions had shown the world something important. That the royal guard wasn't just ceremony. That the people protecting Britain's royal family were real, trained, willing to sacrifice. "If it helps people understand what we do," James said carefully, "then yes, sir. I'm comfortable with it." 3 weeks later, James stood in the palace courtyard during the changing of the guard ceremony. Tourists lined the gates, cameras ready. The media had indeed told his story. The young guard who'd climbed a storm-swept wall, who'd fought an intruder, who'd protected the princess and her children, but they hadn't told everything. They didn't know about Charlotte's salute, about the quiet conversation in the receiving room, about the way Prince William had looked at him with respect that transcended rank and title. Those moments belonged to James. They were his to carry, private and precious. As the ceremony concluded, James took his post at the palace entrance. Tourists approached for photos. Children waved at him. A little girl, maybe Charlotte's age, asked her mother if that was the brave guard from the news. James stood motionless, as protocol demanded. But inside, he smiled. That evening, in the guards' barracks, James's mother called. She'd seen the news coverage, read the articles. She was crying, telling him how proud she was, how his father would have been bursting with joy. "Did it feel like you imagined?" she asked. "Being a hero?" James thought about the question, about the terror on the ledge, the impact of hitting the intruder, the sound of Charlotte crying, the weight of responsibility. "I wasn't trying to be a hero, ma'am," he said softly. "I was just trying to do my job." That's what makes you one, she replied. 6 months passed. James continued his service, though his role expanded. He was asked to help train new recruits to share his experience, to teach them that protecting the royal family was about more than standing still and looking impressive. It was about being ready for the moment. When everything went wrong, about trusting your training, but also your instinct, about understanding that the uniform carried a promise: I will protect you, no matter the cost. One afternoon, James was posted at Kensington Palace when a familiar black car pulled up. The prince and princess, returning from an engagement. The children were with them, laughing about something. As they passed, Charlotte caught his eye. She didn't salute this time. She just smiled. A small, knowing smile that said, I remember. I'll always remember. And James, maintaining his perfect posture, his face professionally neutral, let his eyes smile back. Years would pass. James would continue serving, would rise in rank, would eventually retire with honors. But that night in the storm, that moment on the ledge, would remain the defining experience of his life, not because it made him famous, not because he received awards, but because in that moment, he'd learned something essential about himself. About courage, about duty, about the difference between wearing a uniform and embodying what it represents. The Royal Guard had earned Britain's respect that night, not through ceremony or tradition, but through the actions of one young man who'd understood that real protection means being willing to risk everything, and standing beside Princess Catherine and Prince William. James Whitmore had proven that some promises are worth keeping. No matter the storm, the palace lights glowed warm against the evening sky. Inside, a family slept safely. Outside, guards stood watch, ready for whatever might come. That was the covenant. That was the duty. That was the honor. And James Whitmore wore it proudly every single day.